President William Samoei Ruto going home come 2027 is an idea whose time has finally come, and from what I foresee, a time is coming that not even a single honorable member of parliament will want to associate themselves with neither President William Samoei Ruto himself nor his entire government. But again, do you know where the rains started beating President William Samoei Ruto? Listen, my fellow Kenyan, the problems we are currently experiencing today did not descend from heaven. There are problems, and these are problems that President William Samoei Ruto himself carefully planted, watered them, and he is currently on his way to harvesting them. I personally can't deny the fact that the entire UDA brigade was full of political failures, and that is right after them finding themselves in government. But the worst mistake that President William Samoei Ruto did is right after them finding themselves being head of government, instead of him solving the problem, he went a notch higher by making the problems more big. Because instead of him solving the problem, he saw it fit to shift goalpost and squarely blame it on the former deputy president Rigathi Gachagua, thus creating a more and much bigger problem than what had previously existed. My fellow Kenyan, I wouldn't want to choose sides, but I strongly believe President William Samoei Ruto's problems are more of political problems than they ought to be economical problems. Because when President William Samoei Ruto failed to lead as a leader and not as a politician, then that automatically marked the beginning of his failures in government. When President William Samoei Ruto failed to behave and balance between politicking and leading this country, I strongly believe that marked the beginning of his failure in government. When President William Samoei Ruto got into power, seeing himself as the Alpha and Omega, by then, if you remember pretty well, he would address Kenyans with other failed politicians with a lot of ignorance that bordered arrogance. I strongly believe that marked the genesis of his problems. If you remember pretty well, when President William Samoei Ruto got into power, he began seeing himself as the Alpha and Omega, going to an extent of abusing not only the system but also abusing his predecessor Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and people like the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, to whom was in the opposition. By then, I strongly believe that marked the beginning of his leadership problems. When President William Samoei Ruto saw it fit to capture not only the legislature but also the judiciary and the opposition at large, thus leaving no room for any dissenting voices from Kenyans to air their dissatisfaction in government. I strongly believe that automatically marked the genesis of his problems. If you remember pretty well, when President William Samoei Ruto decided to reward government positions based on connections and not based on meritocracy, from where I sit, I strongly believe that is exactly where he decided to part ways with his own peace, thus marking the beginning of his leadership problems. And from where I sit, I strongly believe President William Samoei Ruto's problems are more of leadership problems and not economical problems as they ought to be. And one among the many reasons as to why I strongly believe his problems are more of leadership problems than economical problems. Let me just decipher one example. If you remember pretty well, we previously had his predecessor being President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, to whom he ruled Kenyans and Kenya through a very harsh and economic time of the COVID-19 and the longest drought of the century. But through his leadership skills, he made Kenya maneuver through it. However, he, just like any other president, he had his own shortcomings while he was at the helm of power. But from where I sit, I strongly believe Uhuru had his own shortcomings, but leadership skills was not one among his problems. Apparently, if I am just to add this as a rejoinder, is that President William Samoei Ruto failed terribly when he thought that managing the country is all about inviting few kingpins and some church leaders, and in this context maybe some pastors and bishops, to State House for purposes of handouts and brown envelopes. I kid you not, that is exactly where the president got into the problems he is currently. How I wish that up to the time of this broadcast, the president and millions of Kenyans are yet to identify where and how and why President William Samoei Ruto and his problems are. Because once you are able to identify your problems, then automatically that is the first step of finding what the solution is. And it is not until he is able to identify all these problems I've stated above, I kid you not, he is likely not to deliver on anything, even if Kenyans grant him 10 years in office. But from where I sit, that has just been my opinion. If by any chance you do have a counter opinion to mine, you can as well. Just feel free to drop them in the comment section and I'll give them a right of reply. And by any chance, if you have been watching my videos and you have not subscribed, you can as well just consider hitting on the subscribe button. Thank you, and may God bless you.